this morning prayer. May I call on Miss Reina Maputi to lead our opening prayer.
Let, let's bow down our head and put the presence of the Lord. In the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit, Amen. Our most heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we are able to gather this day in this webinar. We ask for your guidance that we may be able to learn in this activity and impart this learning in the future. May everything we do begin with your inspiration and continue with your help. We also ask for your guidance throughout this meeting that all our thoughts and actions would really happen according to your will, and that you would grant us the grace to love you and our neighbors more perfectly. This we all ask and pray through your one and only Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you for the opening prayer, Miss Reina Maputi. Now, may I call on Miss Renelle R. Salem, Head of Libraries of St. Michael College of Caraga Learning Resource Center, for her welcome remarks and to introduce our guest speaker for this webinar.
Sorry. Okay, good morning. Mayong buntag sa tanan. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, loud and clear.
Sorry. So I am pleased to welcome you to the St. Michael College of Caraga Learning Resource Centers. This is our first webinar entitled Preserving Historical Documents. We are truly grateful for your interest to attend our first webinar. We do hope that you will learn a lot from our guest speaker, Ms. Emmabeth, and that you would be able to apply your learnings to properly take care of our personal collections or institutions' historical collections. About our session today, our guest speaker will share to us her expertise and best practices on preserving collections. Specifically, this webinar aims to provide participants with international best practices and standards in preventive conservation for their historic collections. I believe that by participating in this webinar, we are in the right place at the right time. Together, let us accelerate the exchange of ideas and scaling up the good practices in doing archival works. It is great pleasure for me to introduce our guest speaker today, who is going to talk to us about the preserving of historical documents. This is a subject in which we should be deeply interested because it's by avoiding deterioration of our personal or institutions' historical documents that can be ensured to prolong the life of our records by slowing down the process of decay in order to restore and keep them in usable condition and be able to pass on to the young generation. Our speaker, born and raised in Nasipit, Agusan del Norte, technically born in Butuan. So she attended her elementary school at Nasipit Central Elementary School. Attended first and almost all of second year at St. Michael College of Caraga, formerly known as St. Michael Institute. She finished her bachelor degree in political science with focus on internal relation, international relations at University of California, Los Angeles, graduated in year 2007. While at the OCLA, she was a working student at the Getty for 4 quarter terms, where she mostly worked with digital images in Getty Digital Repository. She worked briefly in a corporate law firm as a file clerk, as one a political science graduate does. She found out that she didn't like working for law firms. So after that, after gigging for 6 months at the after school program as an after school teacher, then on January 2008, she returned to the Getty and have been there since. That's 12 plus years. For 12 years, her tasks rotated between copyright assessments, reading room service, registerial work for incoming collections, but recently, she more focused on processing archives. In 2013, while working full-time, she enrolled in a San Jose State University, taking up Masters of Library Information Science, graduated in the year 2018. Dear Michaelinians and our distinguished participants, please join me in welcoming home Miss Emmabeth Enghog Nanol.
Okay, thank you for that generous introduction. Let me see if I can um, do my
Okay.
entire screen. Okay. Huh. You must grant permissions in order to share screen. I don't know what to do.
Oh,
Um,
how how come?
okay. Let's see again. It won't let me share my screen. I'm sorry, everyone. One more time.
There's nothing appear here to accept your presentation, Miss Emmabeth.
So,
Just like what we did last
yeah,
time.
so I'm doing a present now button and present your entire screen. And it said you must grant permissions in order to share screen. Um, I can just email it to you and then you
Wait.
can. This is so weird.
Just send it to me to
Yeah,
my Facebook
yeah,
account.
I
Is
will
it
do
okay?
that. And I'll just
Okay.
go next slide and then you'll know.
Okay.
Okay, it's been sent. Let's see.
One moment, please. Just pinning the PowerPoint of Miss Emmabeth. Okay.
Okay, now we're in business. All right. So, the title of my talk is Preserving Historical Documents, Standards and Best Practices. Good morning to everybody. It's funny because it's October 7th there in the morning. It's October 6th here at 6:30 p.m. So you're kind of a day ahead. Uh, so my name is Emmabeth Nanol. I work in the Getty Research Institute, and I've been working there for a little bit over 12 years. So I've been there for a very long time. All right, so next slide. Before we begin, I want to define some terms. Uh, Libraries and archives might live in the same building and share the same purposes, but they're actually quite different. Libraries, according to Society of American Archivists, can generally be defined as collections of books and or other print or non-print materials organized and maintained for use. Patrons of those libraries can access material of the library via the internet, especially now, or by checking them out for home use. Library exists to make their collections available to the people they serve. So that kind of mentality of serving people is the same with the archives, but with kind of different materials that they deal with. Archives from the same Society of American Archivists can hold both published and unpublished materials. And those materials can be in any format. Some examples are manuscripts, letters, photographs, moving images, and sound materials, artwork, books, diaries, artifacts, and the digital equivalent of all these things. Materials in an archives are often unique, specialized or rare objects, meaning very few of them exist in the world or they are the only ones of their kind. So when we think of library versus archives, library is something that is for published materials such as monographs, periodicals, journals, and archives are unique unpublished materials. Those are letters that you wrote to your friends that are not part of your archive, and that's what the archives normally deal with. Archives can also contain published materials. At the Getty, we include it in the archive when there are a lot of annotations on the book so that the value of the published material is the annotations and not the book itself. Because you can, if it's a copyrighted book but it's published, you can find it anywhere. So that becomes part of the archives. Next slide. I think we need to make it full. Yeah. We're only half. Okay. Are we seeing the whole thing or just half? I'm only seeing half of the presentation. Okay. It was doing so well. All right. And then maybe um maybe do it. Okay, I guess we can do it from that small one. Okay, perfect. And archives in the GRI is even more granular. Um, we have institutional archives, which is a department that houses our own institution's archive. The documentation of our activities is an international culture and philanthropic organization dedicated to the visual arts. And we also house J. Paul Getty's papers. J. Paul Getty as the founder of our museum and the founder of our trust. And actually, I am transcribing one of his diaries because we are trying to put them all online. So that is the Institutional Archives Department in the GRI. Where I work in is called Special Collections, and it's a collection consisting of rare and unique materials from the 15th century to the present, including rare books, prints, drawings, rare photographs, manuscripts, and collection. So one of the pictures there is a book of Seven Seals by in the Ripper Scroll from the 1700s. So it's not too old, but we have all those materials in the special collections. Next slide. Even more terms, and if you're in the library science world, or if you're already in the profession, you'll know that terminology is very big in our profession. In the special collections in my department, we use the term papers and records because ultimately it's not an archive that is our archive. It's an archive of many people that we collect. And in order to differentiate whether it's a paper collections from an individual or corporate bodies, we use the term paper for an individual. For example, Alan Sikula, I've been working on his collection for over 3 years. Alan Sikula was a lifelong photographer, artist who documented injustice and inequality brought by heightened globalization. And he was also a professor at Colorado University until his death in 2013. And so he's an individual person. So we call his archive Alan Sikula Papers. So like the website calls Alan Sikula Archive for the bigger public, but in our department we actually call it Alan Sikula Papers, and it includes everything. Just because you have the word papers doesn't mean it only has papers. It includes photographs, negatives, his diaries, his VHS. We have a lot of audiovisual materials from his collection. So the term paper is encompassing, it includes everything. The term records are for corporate bodies. Now, this is probably you will learn this as you go along in your academic discipline. Records are delegated to corporate bodies. These are businesses, architectural firms, and institutions that we have collected over time. One of our biggest records is the Nodler Gallery. I worked on this papers in this collection as well for more than 5 years. It's an influential gallery that kind of molded the American taste for art as it kind of populated all the arts of the National Gallery, of the Met, and just to give you the scale of this paper, the Alan Sikula has about 300 boxes, and we're only halfway done. The Nodler Gallery archive, or the Nodler Gallery record, has 5,504 boxes. So you can imagine the scale of this in our vaults. Next slide. I took this diagram for my archives and manuscript textbook, and it's the life cycle of any archive. And my job is mainly in the preserve portion of it. The identify is work done by our curators. We have about 11 curators who are subject experts, and they're the ones that are looking at our research focus, annual research focus, and make sure they find all these materials to collect. And they're also there to ensure that we are in line with the mission of the Getty. When things are acquired, the accessioning goes to our registrars. Our registrars are the ones who primarily assess the physical condition of the materials. So if the boxes come moldy or infested, they will wrap all these boxes and isolate them from a vault and fumigate them. They're also there to make sure everything arrived safely and everything arrived. So they are looking the materials against acquisition forms from the curators, and they make sure all the significant items arrive in that shipment. And as I mentioned, we have 11 curators. We have about 6 archivists in my department, and each curator is a collecting curator. So if they only collect one collection, that'll be 11 per year, and there are only 6 of us, and each of us are working on certain archives for many, many years. So we have a lot of backlog. The way to go about it is that every year several people in different departments reference, which talks to our researchers and our users, our scholars who are different every year depending on theme, and our circulation people. They talk to each other, they have a meeting and figure out which collections get prioritized. And when they list all those collections and they prioritize the collections that they want to be processed, they get assigned to us. So each one of us get different collection when they determine which ones to work on. And when we do, we are required to create processing plan. Next slide. Processing plan. Oh, I forgot. So this is what our our collections look like when they arrive in their original boxes. After check-in, they are shelved in our vaults. So this is in one of our vaults in the original boxes. And if the boxes are soiled, heavily soiled, that means it's very dirty, we tend to change it because we don't want any more dust in our vault, because there are actually special collections that are already processed in the same vault. If there are molds, you definitely have to take it out because it can make you physically sick. So it gets into a different kind of room. And so I was saying, when things get assigned to us, we create processing plan, and it includes. So next slide. So our processing plan looks a little bit like this. This is only half of the plan because it's actually very long. The collection title or the accession number is given by our registrar's office when they accession the materials. So it has a lot of coding. We do a lot of coding for manuscripts. We use the letter M to denote that that particular collection is the manuscript. For rare photographs, we use the letter R for that particular collection. And our accession number is also a little bit like the provenance information of the archive. So for the Alan Sikula archive, for example, the accession number is 2016 M22. That's given by the registrars. That means it was acquired in 2016. M means it's a manuscript. 22 means it's the 22nd acquisition of that year. So that's included. So that's one of the things that is included in the processing plan. It's pretty much an identity of the entire collection, all its components. So when you're processing, whatever that comes out of that collection always will have that number. The creators comes from the acquisition forms that curators write. For the Alan Sikula papers, it's Alan Sikula is the creator. For the Nodler records, Nodler is the creator. So you have to have a creator also for your bibliographic records, which we'll talk about in the near future. Provenance information, you want to know where the materials come from, because it's very important for researchers, but it's also important in terms of legality of your institution. You want to know if you bought the materials, and which kinds of copyright you have included in your contract, that if you have any images that you want, you just go back to that provenance information and you know if you have the right to the images or not. Processor, that's where we put our names. And supervisor, because I'm an archives assistant, I get to have a supervisor, which is pretty much a supervisor of our entire, the manager of our entire section. Additional staff is most likely the people that will help you temporarily. A lot of us will be helped by work study student, like myself. When I was a work study, I used to help some. We have annual interns, graduate interns, so they will likely to be additional staff. Date assigned is when you have been assigned, so that's kind of self-explanatory. Anticipated date of completion is a little bit tricky all the time because the boxes come to you, you don't know what's inside the boxes. So if there are hundreds of boxes and you're only looking at the two boxes to determine your date of completion, you don't really know if the next box is more problematic in terms of processing. So we opted for a completion date that is more like month, year. It's not really set in stone. We can do seasons or year. You're completing the project summer of 2021. So you have 3 months leeway to complete the project. Descriptive standards to be applied. We'll talk more about that. We use DAX, or describing archives standards. Extent is how many boxes you have in your collection. And in the Getty, we use linear feet because the term box is different for every institution. So you don't really know if the box is this big or that big. So we tend to use linear footage for extent. Formats is it mostly paper? Is it mostly audiovisual materials? Is it mostly photographs? Description of the collection, primarily you would get this from acquisition forms because the curators have already done their research. They already know what they're talking about. So they would describe it when they're presenting it to the curatorial department. So you would plug in a little bit of their wording and then go back to it when you have completely processed the collection to make sure that what they're saying is actually true. Because most of our curators, if not all, haven't seen the entire archive either. Present arrangement and cushion. Arrangement is a little bit tricky because, as you can see from the picture of the boxes, they come from mostly basements or storage with no arrangement. So this is likely to be blank until you're actually processing the archive. And throughout, you can put all the arrangement into order. But I can tell you that in all of our archives, we normally have a correspondence series because correspondence is very important to our users, but it's also important for art history in terms of influence, who influenced who worked with whom. So you normally would have correspondence as one of a series in your arrangement. And then proposed level of processing. It's very interesting because it varies between collection. If you have mixed papers that are the papers and the records, your arrangement is, or your processing level is likely to be in the folder level or in the box level. But if you're processing prints, like 5 prints or 10 rare photographs, your processing level is likely to be itemized. For photographs, for example, we have a cataloger who research on who people in the photographs. What type of photograph is it? It could be a daguerreotype, it could be a black and white. So it's a very itemized level of processing for the collection of rare photos of rare prints. But for mixed materials, such as the things I'm working on, the Alan Sikula or the Nodler, it's likely to be in the folder or the box level. Restricted materials. This is even more important now that we're collecting contemporary artists' materials. These are artists that are still alive. And when they give us their archives, and when they sell us their archives, they include everything. It could be correspondence from 2 years ago. It could be a credit card statement from 2 years ago. So all things that are still active, you want to restrict those, because the last thing you want to do is give your users access to bank accounts that are still active, or letters that are not so nice, of people that are still alive. You want to restrict that, and it's for the sake of your institution as well. You don't want people getting upset with you, so you restrict those materials. And normally it's for letters, it's after the death of the artist, then you open it up, because then they can't come after the artist. But for bank statements and credit card statements, just to be sure, it's the life, so the death plus 75 years. So that's our protocol at the Getty. In terms of medical records, it's completely confidential in the United States. You cannot ask people what kind of diseases they have, what kind of pills they're on. So for medical, it's not restricted. It's actually sealed until, I think, the life of that person. Special supply needs. So I'm actually in charge of our archival supplies in the GRI, and this is especially very important because some collections come to us with artworks, and artworks don't belong in folders. So you want to make sure that you determine housing for special things that come in your collection, and you let us know so that it can be ordered, it can be made ahead of time, and you're not waiting. Propose deaccession and transfers. So the deaccessions are things that do not belong in the scope of your mission, that do not belong in the scope of that artist's life. For example, we have an artist who is a contemporary artist, and basically he puts everything on his table into a box, and that comes to us as his day's work. And it could be, a piece of wood or a dirty T-shirt, and that doesn't really belong in his scope. So you want to make sure that, things that are not in scope, you are not spending time rehousing. So just remember all those things as you process each box. Next slide. Do we have the next slide? Uh-oh. Okay. So physical processing. That's me in the green when I was work study. So that was me 12 years ago. And with my gloves on, we were processing in our reading room. And Sarah is one of our graduate interns from a few years ago, and she's taking the boxes off the shelf. So we use the ladder, make sure you're safe in the ladder. And so we're going to talk about arrangement. In physical processing, the first thing you want to know is there an arrangement on the boxes on the shelves? Or if there is an original inventory, that's even better, right? So you look for that in the research files, and if the inventory doesn't exist, we look at all the markings on the boxes that it came in. So in the picture, all the boxes in front of me have markings on them. So what we normally do is we use an Excel sheet. Column 1 is for your temporary box number. Column 2 is the writing on the label of the boxes. And column 3 are dates. We normally separate the dates because we find a lot of patterns when you're just looking at dates instead of the full label itself. And if you can, you go through, you look at the Excel sheets that you just made very carefully, and you find patterns. For example, if you're working on an artist's papers, you might find that there are a lot of boxes devoted to his projects. and a lot of boxes devoted to a particular project. So you want to make sure that you highlight that in your Excel sheet so that you know which boxes to pull as you're working. So you're not just pulling whatever boxes on the shelf, because when our boxes go on the shelf in our vault, they're not in particular order. So you kind of have to make order out of all the boxes on the shelf. If the original inventory doesn't exist and there's no writing on the boxes, then you kind of have to begin processing from box one, which is a lot of work because you don't really know what you're up against. So, but it could also be fun because then you get to learn what this person is all about as you're processing. Next slide. So now we're getting to the nitty gritty of the physical processing. When you open the box, uses the condition of the original folder. If the original folder is soiled, that means it's really dirty and there are bugs and dirt and everything. You want to replace it with archival folder. If you have access to archival folder, this is what it looks like on the photo on to your left. It's a little bit it's browner than just regular folder, and it is good long term. It prevents acidity of the paper, or slows down acidity of the paper. A lot of modern paper are created very cheaply, so there's a lot of acid in it, which is big with newspapers, and that's why newspapers turns into yellow and they brittle because the paper is made very cheaply with a lot of acid. And the problem with this is if you have paper that's already acidic, you don't want to put it right next to a good paper because it's actually contagious. So over time, your good paper will become yellow and brittle as well. So you kind of want to isolate the newspapers, isolate things that are already turning yellow. And if you have access to archival folders, you want to use that. Next slide. Removing rusty staples is so much fun. I specifically included this because Philippines is a tropical country. It's very humid, and a lot of the papers that will probably come from collections from humid place have rusty staples and paper clips. We normally use micro spatula or any other tool that will not further damage the documents. This picture is not actually good practice because you're supposed to remove the entire thing to your side, and remove the staples there. You do not remove on top of other materials because it will only stain the materials underneath with the rust, and or you might damage materials underneath. So remove the staple like the picture, but in a more conscious way. What you don't want to use is the staple remover that we use in the office, where you yank the staples, creating more holes and ripping the side of the paper. So that's the one thing you never want to use. And even more important is you want to keep all the papers that were once stapled together, because context is very vital to the work of an archivist, right? So if it's a correspondence of 6 sheets and you remove the staple, you want all those six sheets to remain intact. What we normally use at the Getty is, without the print, we fold the bond paper and you put all the 6 sheets into it so that it's like a mini folder. And we hope that the users will be careful with it as well. But the thing to remember is always context is very important. So we do not restaple, never restaple. And we don't use new paper clips, mainly because over time it will also rust, and or it creates more indentation in the paper. So just use the bond paper, folded bond paper as your mini folders. Next slide. Processing photographs is also very tricky, especially when they're in between the papers. Because ideally, color prints have to be stored in a totally totally separate vaults. At the Getty, we have two vaults devoted to photographs, one for black and white, and one for color prints. And colored inkjet prints are even more fragile than color photographs that were taken by analog camera. So if a correspondence, for example, the picture on the left is a correspondence with five or six different photos of different colors. Thankfully, none of them is actually a color print. It's the color that you see is just a print from a magazine that was cut. If you have a color print, ideally you want to have it separated from all the papers. And I was just talking about context is very important. And so for that, you have to create this separation sheet or just write on the paper in the folded bond paper saying color photo removed. And in the color photo, you also have to reference where you have removed it from so that if a user ever comes, he or she's going to know that there was a color photo with these papers. And if he or she's looking at the photo, they will know that there was also papers with it. So the color prints, they want to be stored in the coldest temperature of our vault. They need lower light to prevent them from fading and less humid because otherwise they're going to stick to each other if the humidity change. Over time, black and white prints have become more liberal with our protocols. We actually leave them with the papers, but we put them in what we call mylar sleeves. So that's what you see onto your right side. The mylar sleeve is a plastic that's non-petroleum based, and not only does it protect the photo over time, it also protects them from fingerprints when users are looking at them in our reading room. So it's a lot of good use to us. We use the non-petroleum base because our conservators found that over time petroleum degrades and sticks to the emulsion portion of the photos and destroys the image. So you want to make sure that it's non-petroleum. And I think another company that makes these materials not as shiny as Mylar is Printfile. So Printfile is a good company to have in mind when you're processing photographs. Next slide. So when you have processed the papers and the photographs and you're ready to put them all in a folder, you have to include the accession number in the folder. So like I said, the accession number is the identity of that collection and all the components of that collection. And it's assigned by the registrars, like the Alan Sikula paper and Photography Institute records. The box numbers, we are using it sequential throughout the entire collection. I know some institution restart their box number according to their series. For example, if you have a correspondence series and you have 5 boxes that go 1 to 5, and then you have like a business record series, they restart their numbering 1 to 5. In the Getty Research Institute, we use one sequential box numbers throughout the collection, and that is also to be that's also for accounting. We want to know how many boxes is in the collection. We're not adding up every single series. Folder number, we restart it with every single box. So an example that I showed here is the Alan Sikula folder numbering. So you have the accession number 2016 M22. You have the last name of the person. So if it were Nodler, you'd say 2012 M54 Nodler. And you want to use a little bit of a description of the content of your folder so that when a researcher is looking in the inside of your box, they know which ones to go to. So it would say correspondence, photographs, letters, and you would indicate always the box numbers inside the folder, inside the box, and the folder number. We also use item number only for audiovisual materials and objects. And the audiovisual materials is completely different kind of process that needs a whole new webinar. It has its own numbering system. So I just want to say that in our collection, we have a lot of audiovisual materials, and that's why it's part of this. slide, but it's basically you are numbering per type and you have to know all the types. So next slide. So that was the physical processing of an archive. Now we move on to actually writing your finding aid, what people are looking at, the pretty much the write up of your work. Up until the early 2000s, we used AACR2, which is the Anglo-American cataloging rule. So the standard requires us to like to describe the items based on intellectual units, but we also were recommended to catalog materials, describe materials based on type. So the example that I'm showing is the container list for the George Herb's papers. I've worked on this paper, so I know a little bit about it. So if you look at series one, it's his education papers about his schooling from 1940 to 1996. So you have all those series, and then you look at series 10, it says films, videos, and audio tapes. And you know, when your series is describing what it is, not the content, you know that you are describing based on type. Because, for example, series 8 is artist files, and it could be an artist file where the films and videos are in series 10. So in this case, the user actually has to look at several places to find all the materials for the artist they're looking for in this collection. So what happened in ACR is that the finding aid tends to be less hierarchical and flatter. It's because everything is in like one liner, right? And I'll show you what we're doing now with DAX. Next slide, please. So in 2005, right about where like a little bit before I started, and you know, with all the standards, institution always have to think if they want to adapt it right away, if their catalogers are in the middle of processing already and it takes years, they want to keep up with the same processing standard that they've used before because you don't want to go back. You know, if you're processing 5,000 boxes and you're already in your 2,000 boxes and the standard change in the middle, you don't want to go back. And you don't want to describe one half of it as ACR2 and the other half DAX. So it took the Getty a while to adapt DAX, or what we call Describing Archives Content Standard. DAX is output neutral. It's a set of rules to describe archives, personal papers, manuscript collections, but can also be applied to rare photos and prints. So that's what we mean by output neutral. It's for all types of materials. And I am giving you an example of the Jan Baum Gallery finding aid. So if you look at the container list to the left, you'll only have 3 series. And if you look at one of the instances, an image to the right, you see that Sylvia Glass, under her name, it's very hierarchical. She has the papers under her, she has photographs under her name, CDs under her name. So if you can remember what's going on with the ACR2, the CDs are likely to be in a different series. But with DAX, the CDs are in the same series under the person's name, the creator of the series. So this is a more hierarchical form of finding aid, and it's a finding aid that is largely used in pretty much all institutions, and especially big institutions in the United States. Next slide. Just to give you a little brief example of a space. So we think of DAX as the content. This is how we form our titles, our dates. This is the contents to our finding aid. Archive space is our information management system. So DAX is the content, archive space is the visible. So that what goes in to archive space. Uh, and when we create a whole new finding aid, we create using a new resource. So as you can tell, there's a create and there's a drop down button and you click on the new resource. Next slide. And when you click on the new resource, this is what it looks like. And this is pretty much a quarter of all required fields that you have to fill up. So you can imagine you have just done all your processing. It'll take years, and now you're doing this. The title, what goes into the title, is the name of the artist, the name of the individual, or the corporate bodies, plus the term paper or records. So, for example, the Alan Sikula papers, that title would go into the title field. The identifier is the accession number. So you pretty much know all the things that are going to these fields. And the level of description is collection because this is the highest in the hierarchy that you're creating. The language is the language of the finding aid. So you put English for the United States, and then published is, you want everything published. I have to say that archive space is not live, so while you're working on it, it's not uploading. It's not uploading every day. So it actually goes to a different kind of department, a totally different department for things to get uploaded. Next slide. This is just some of the other required fields, the dates. It's very important. So you go through the dates, you look at every single paper almost when you're processing, make sure you get all the dates in your little notes. If there are undated materials, you say 1940 to 2013, comma, undated. So all this and how you form your date is in a DAX content in the DAX textbook. And it's actually free for everybody. So if you want, I can send them to you after. Extent, linear footage, or the number of units. For mixed materials, we use linear footage because we're processing thousands of boxes. But if you're processing rare photos that are just 100 or 150, you want to say 150 rare photographs. Biographical notes, this is to me is the hardest because it's your original research. So you read all the acquisition forms and all the research materials, and you have to figure out why this collection is in your repository. What is it doing to your mission? So you write biographical notes a lot of the time. Well, some of the times, not a lot of the times. Artist papers are from artists who are largely unknown. So what you write is actually a material that researchers are going to use in their research. So you want to be careful about what you write. And it goes through a lot of reviews. All this writing that we're doing, it goes through peer review in our department with subject experts. Scope and content, you enumerate the type of materials that are found in the archive. For example, if you're doing, well, it's like the Alan Sikula papers, you would say photographs relating to his projects, fish story from 1913 to 2013. So you want to say what they are going to be looking at, what the researchers are going to be looking at. You want to give them a heads up, like this is where you're up against. And you are pretty much the only person besides the person that created the materials that got to see everything. So you want to give them some kind of help and a heads up of what they should be expecting when they're looking at a certain box. Arrangement, how is the entire collection arranged? So again, we go back to this arrangement notes. Now that you have looked at everything, now that you have processed everything, what is the arrangement that you decided? And arrangement can change as you work through the papers. It could be changed the last minute. It could be changed almost 80% into the work. For example, the Alan Sikula, we were gonna have a separate series for projects and publications, and then we figured out later on, we're in the middle of it, we figured later on that his projects became publication over time. So you want to make that change, and it means going back, but it's also means being accurate to that person's legacy, to represent that person correctly in history, because ultimately that's what archivists are doing, right? You're like the steward of history, and you're representing it for future generation. There are several more note options and tabs to choose from, and it's really also depending on your institutional protocol. Some institution might use the copyright note to say, like, we don't own any of these materials. The photographs we don't own, but we don't use that at the Getty because we have lawyers that are actually determining those things. Next slide. So when you're processing, that was in the collection level. Now we're in the folder level. This is taken from the Alan Sikula finding aid. So the title is normally the title that you would write on the folder. The title of this was taken from Alan Sikula's label, his handwritten label himself. So if you can find a label that's original, you want to include that as part of the title. And the level of description, because you are below collection level, is the file level. And then you want to use the date, the creation date. And if you have a range of dates, you can do an inclusive dates. If you just have one date, a very specific date, there is a drop down for a single date. So, but we have always used inclusive dates, and the purpose of this is that over time, and we haven't done this yet, we haven't found the right program for the Getty, is that it will all be searchable. All these fields are all going to be searchable, keyword searchable in hopefully the near future. Next slide. Do we have the next slide? Okay, so also in the note field, we're likely to use scope and contents. We use this field for everything, pretty much. So Alan Sikula was very particular about his notebooks. So he included in his original inventory the number of his notebook, so NB, notebook number 3. And you want to capture all the information that is original from the item. The notebook is 11 by 8.5 inch, and he counted all the filled pages and all the pages that contain drawings. So you want to capture that in the scope and content. And you record the box number and the folder number in the instances. This is also at the very end of the box level entries, and it's a mixed material because it's a collection of papers, and box 1, folder 3. So that's how it looks like when you fill it all up. Next slide, please. And then when you finish with that, and I have to say, we have done this kind of entry for a finding aid. Our biggest finding aid is over 3,000 pages when you print it. So you can imagine all these things that are just being populated in the archive space. When you complete a finding aid, you go back to your collection level and you add all the individuals and corporate bodies who are creators and or contributors to the collection. And you will find the creator, it's very easy to determine that because it's in the acquisition forms, but the contributors, you'll find that out as you process the materials. This is taken from the George Herms papers, and as you can see, the role is a creator. The realtor is Wallace Berman is a contributor, and the second one is also a contributor, Love Press. And then the last one, creator, is George Herms. So you tally all those names all those artistic movements into these fields of what they call agents in the finding aid. Next slide, please. And then when you're finished with the agents, you you add subject headings. Now, for people who are already professional in the library world, we know subject headings very well. But for archive space, it includes subject headings and form and genre. So the difference is that subject headings is what this thing is all about. Genre is what it is. For example, in this presentation, what it is a PowerPoint presentation, right? That would be the form and genre. The subject headings is what is the presentation about. So you would say it is about preserving historical documents. So that's those both of those things in the archive space world is captured in the same settings. So for example, this is taken from a more itemized record. Subject is screen prints, so that is what it is. It's a video recording of United States 20th century, but it's also about art in America, in California, in Los Angeles in the 20th century, and it's an exhibition. So they're all captured in the same fields. Next slide, please. So when you finish, this is the George Herm's paper, 2009 M20. That means it was acquired in 2009. M is a manuscript, and 20 means it's the 20th acquisition of that year. So when you finish, it looks like this. Your title goes into the descriptive summary tab. So you have George Herms, the number, creators, abstract. So also this is you can take the abstract from your scope and content and just make it shorter. It's kind of telling you like a small brief of what you're looking at. And also all the blue linked to your left has the scope and content node. So when you click on that, it's all your writing is in it. And the container list is also in there. And you can click on that and you'll find hopefully what you're looking for. Next slide. So when you're finished with the finding aid, when you're finished with DAX and archive space, you also have to create bibliographic record. There is a lot of duplication in our archival work in the Getty. It's because our software don't really talk to each other, and we're trying to remedy that, and hopefully in the long run we will. The only way people can find our collection is through libraries programs like we use Primo, and this is how it looks like in Primo when you're looking for George Herm papers. And it's not pulling from archive space. This is not archive space. This is bibliographic record that most book catalogers, they mostly use this, not us. So when I have to create them, I always have to look at all the guidelines because I could be working in an archive for 5 years and create this one time. So this is not something that I do all the time. So I'm not, it's very interesting when I have to do it and I have to get a refresher every time I do it. In the past or until recently, we used MARC. So we normally call it MARC record, not bibliographic record. It's machine readable cataloging and it's very precise. And just lately with contemporary materials, we added some RDA fields. The RDA fields is telling us what we need to view an archive. For example, it will include things like, so the fields is 336, 330, 338. So for your library people, you might know this. It's telling us, is it a text or is it a moving image? If it's a moving image, what kind of things do I need to view this moving image? Do I need a computer? Do I need a microfilm viewer? What do I need? So the 3 fields is so that people don't go to the library unprepared, or the library is not prepared to make these things accessible to the public. So it's it's a little tricky with the archives because, as you can imagine, we have all kinds of formats, and all those things have to be captured in the RDA field. So, like for example, the George terms might have a CD. That's three fields for the CD. Might have photographs. That's three fields for the photographs. Might have negatives. So it's a lot of things that you have to add in the mark record that are not necessarily added in the book cataloging department, because you can have a book and one CD that might accompany it. So you add the RDA fields for the CD, and then that's it. So it's made our lives a little bit more complicated, but we understand why. Next slide. So this is like this always scares me a little bit. I know the book people, they know exactly what this is. With the mark records, these are just some of the things that are required. The marker, the field, the 008 or the lead field, it will tell you exactly what you're looking at. If you're looking at mixed materials, prints, etc., the level of encoding, the types of dates, the city language. It's like a background of what you're supposed to be looking at. 040 is the institution, so you see JPG or Jean Paul Getty. Our 099 is our local field, so that's our accession number that you will find in the processing plan. You will find this in archive space, and now you'll find it in our MARC record. The 100 field is taken from LCNAF. So we use the Library of Congress Name Authority for authorized forms of names. So Alan Skula would go into the 100 field. Nodler would go into the 110 field. So these are the things you'll be learning in library school. The 245 is the title of your collection that's taken from archive space. And like I said, duplication of work. 246 is the date of archives of your collection that's you're also taken from archive space. The 300 is the extent. So that's the linear footage. And also, if you have rare photos, it could be 100 rare photographs. And I talked about the RDA fields. And 351 is the arrangement. So those are all the series that you have created in archive space. So a lot of it is copying and pasting, and also knowing all the fields that they're supposed to go into. But it takes a lot of time. Next slide. So more MARC records. The 600 fields, 650 is contributors, and that is again sometimes taken from archive space. 650 is the subject headings. So this is where it's a little bit different than archive space, because the subject headings go to the 650, and this we also find from Library of Congress. And 655 is the form and genre, and we take it from our very own art and architecture thesaurus at the Getty, which is so helpful, because if we want to add some terms, we just go to the next department and say we would like to add this term so that we can add it in our MARC record. So just a little bit of thing also with subject headings and why it's important. It's a controlled vocabulary or keywords that is highly used by all institutions, so that when it's a link that link all related materials in all the repositories in the United States. So you want to be using the subject headings that is in LCNAF if you want your collection to be visible when a person is searching what we call here world cataloging. So when you're in the WorldCat subject heading, you click on that, your collection should pop up if you're using the subject heading that's in the Library of Congress. Next slide. So this is what my Library of Congress, I think This is an old interface and I like it because I know how to navigate it, but I know there is like a more updated version, but this is pretty much what it looks like when you're looking for a certain name or title, authority, or subject headings. Next slide, please. And this is our AAT terms. It is a little bit more forgiving. So if there's a term that you're using and it's the wrong spelling, it will actually still give you the right term. So I'm sure a lot of you kind of know what this is. Next slide. And when you finish the MARC records, you're still not finished. We create holdings records. That means you have to be accurate about it because we have 8 volts in the GRI. And our collection can live in all of the 8 volts. So you want to make sure that you're telling your circulation department which volt to look for when they're looking for the boxes for our researchers. So we have a code. So like, for example, 852 field, we have 7mx. That means volt 7 mixed materials. And it's an archive. So there's a lot of fields that are involved in this holdings, but we don't have to fill up everything. It's just like 4 fields, just to let know what they are, where they are. And then when you have created your holdings record, you want to create all the items record. The item record are the boxes that you just have created. And you want to link the box to the correct volt. Because the last thing you want to do is say box 1 is in volt 8, but it's actually in volt 4. And CERT is looking for that box 1 in your volt 4 and think it's lost. And then, if you forgot that it's actually in volt 8, it will never be found until somebody just happens to find it accidentally. So you want to be careful when you're creating holdings record, when you're attaching item records, so that everything is accessible by other departments and by your users. Next slide. And when you're finished, this is what our boxes look like. So it's from the original cartons. And we use, because the GRI has access to a lot of archival supplies, we rehouse everything, regardless of whether the box is clean or whatever, so we rehouse everything. So all our boxes in our vault look like this. So those are our labels. The barcodes help a lot when people are requesting materials. So when they're being checked in or checked out, you just use the barcode. And that's the work that I think this whole range is probably like a 1-year work for all of us. I think I process about 5 boxes per year, per week. Next slide. And when you finish, this is what the printout looks like from archive space. We normally don't print our finding aid anymore because we could have 1,000 pages of the finding aid and it's not helpful anymore because you're looking at so many things that might not be relevant to your research. So we don't print them, but it's all online. We have the tab in our library site that's called collection, finding aids, and inventories. And like I said, this is not searchable through the library program that we use, the library software that you use. So it's really like, if you already know what you're looking for, it's easy to find this. Otherwise, you kind of have to go through the bibliographic records that you just created. Next slide. So the lessons, I think this is the last two. This is actually the last slide. The lesson so far for me is to read all acquisition forms and research materials before even looking at or touching the box, because I think it informs you on what to expect and what to prioritize processing. and there might be an original inventory which will help you in the long run. When you process your first collection, you will worry, and which I have worried because, like I said, it's a piece of history that you are steward for a while, and you want to be careful about how you describe material so that it's not lost. You know, like if it's a very important letter, you want to say the name of the person. You just don't say, yeah, letter 1940, and it's a very important letter. So you want to be careful about how you describe the materials, but also don't get too nervous about it that you're like you get too bogged down and itemize and not finish processing archive on time. And just be open to feedbacks. I mean, I process it's my 12 years and I still get feedbacks from the archive that I process or collection I process from year one. And they're there to tell you, you know, oh, you got this date wrong, you got this name wrong. And you have to be open to this kind of feedback because those are the people that are actually subject experts. And also, when we finish, uh, you have to be open-minded for other feedbacks from your coworkers. They might be correcting you with your grammar, they might be correcting you with your hierarchy, and you have to be open to those kinds of changes. And the last slide. Are there any questions? I can't believe I talked for an hour.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Beth, Nanol. At this juncture, do we have questions from our audience? We will be having now our Q&A portion.
Anyone
So,
would like anyone would
I
like to
think
ask questions to Miss
I,
Nanol?
I think there's a chat. Let me see.
from Alona Monegro, Ma'am. Hi, Beth. May I just miss this in the discussion, but are the boxes also in fireproof vaults considering the recent wildfires in the area?
That's very good question. Yes, it's in a fireproof, and it's actually we have a system where it sucks oxygen out of the vault if there's fire. And the danger of that is you want to make sure nobody's in the vault because if you suck all the oxygen out of the vault, the person is going to die, right? So because fire, you know, they like to breathe oxygen. So that's one of the things our vault has is the fireproofs. It's also very good with earthquakes. We have a lot of earthquakes in California. But I think the fire is we don't have any protocol of removing any materials in our vaults because it's pretty much safe for the fire. Um, Thank you,
Okay,
Mom.
Ma'am.
All right.
Uh, Here's another question, Ma'am, from Maria Viveline Cabonok. It's it's na
It's a comment.
it's a comment, Ma'am. It's very
Let me read
informative
briefly.
topic. It's not easy to the processing of historical records, but this webinar is very helpful and inspiring to do it.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mom. Yeah, it's not easy and it's very expensive. I mean, I'm talking all these things as if money just grows on the tree, right? It's a very expensive endeavor because just having the vault, just having the right temperature, it's actually a very and just having archive space and the server to store all your finding aids. It's a very expensive endeavor, but it's a very worthy endeavor, obviously. So, yeah. I think we have.
Thank you,
We
Ma'am.
have another question.
From Sir Jolo Abatayo. We're actually planning to establish our archival institution and we would like to initially do it by commencing a research study. What would be the first phase to do and would it be okay to do a community assessment first? Which is which?
I think it depends on what kind of archives you want to establish. I mean, the Getty we do collecting mainly for the arts. If you want to do community archive, you want to know the history of that community. So you want to go to like your municipal halls and all these historical places. You want to know how the town or whatever was was founded. And I think that is more to the route of historical societies. We have a lot of historical societies in the United States, and those are the little museums that are mostly devoted to community archives. And they do a lot of just asking people what they have in their collection and whether they want to impart with it. And you, of course, want to involve them in conversation. You want to be transparent with what you want to do with their archive because that is their personal papers too. So I think what you want to do is determine what kind of archive you want to be, and then like put the word out that you're doing this. And if some people are, I'm sure some people will be interested, and you can go from there. And the next thing is really just getting all the materials and describing them and making sure you hire their users that can elevate the voice of this material so that you have more people coming in and giving their stuff. So it's pretty much a cycle of many things. Conduct or I think there is another question. Um, yes, you need to conduct a survey first. You want to know what's out there, and then appraisal is what you want to keep. So at the Getty and the special collections, we don't do that because the curators do it for us. But in the institutional collection, they actually do appraisal. They want to know what they want to keep. Is this important to the mission of your archival work or your institution? So yeah, definitely conduct, survey your surroundings, and see what's out there, and then appraise. You're very welcome. Um,
Miss Contessa, we have another question, I guess. This is from Mr. Wolfie Lonson. How do you accession book records with mixed formats coming from same provenance and coming at the same time? Is it by bulks or by item?
so the bulk records, we're pretty much concerned with where it comes from. If it comes from the same person, it gets accession as one collection. So and then anything that was found by that person, for example, we have a living artist that kind of donated his entire archive in one go, but he's finding more stuff now that he's cleaning out his house and all that. He's giving it to us at a lot of time. It gets added to the collection, and it gets accession as one record, pretty much. Which is tedious because it could be like some other person has collection of materials from this artist that wants to give it to us, but it's not going to be in his collection because we are dealing. I think our main concern is that where it comes from. Is it from one creator? And mixed formats, it goes into the same. This the term papers is encompassing of all the formats. So it's not going to be, we don't parse out collection materials. We used to do that a very long time ago, but now we want to keep all the materials together and also to kind of keep integrity of the collection.
Uh,
Um, okay.
Sam,
Um, Sorry. Okay. I think Miss Emmabeth, we still have another question.
Yes.
How would you maintain discipline in the archive?
Discipline, you mean like your self discipline? Because I don't know, discipline. Well, if it's policies, okay. Policies is written, so we have a protocol uh, that's been changed and over time uh, refined. And this is the guidelines that we use in addition to DAX. For example, like I said, medical records, it has to be all sealed. So those are part of protocols, and the archive has to kind of, it's not lacking. Sometimes it is lacking because you can have gallery of records that have credit card numbers, like this person purchased this painting from Monet with this credit card, and you have to seal that because it has credit card information. So sometimes the archives become lacking for all those restrictions, but the discipline comes from our legal counsel, and also DAX and all other departments. So yeah, we have guidelines and protocols, I guess.
Um, I guess there are no more questions, Mom.
Yes. So
Thank you,
that's
Mom Emmabeth Nanol. And since there's no more question, we will be wrapping up our session. So
thank you, everybody.
at this juncture, may I call on Miss Mary Jean Tubo to give her thank you message to our guest speaker.
Good day, everyone. And in behalf of my classmates, schoolmates, librarians, and instructors, I would like to say thank you to our dearest speaker, Miss Emmabeth Enghog Nanol. Thank you for giving us your time, Mom, and sharing your knowledge and expertise to us. We learn a lot from you, and it's a great opportunity that we met you in this kind of event. Thank you so much, Mom. And to our dearest as instructor, Ms. Rinal R. Salim, we really appreciate your effort for exposing us in this kind of activity, ma'am. Thank you so much, and God bless us all.
Thank you, Miss Mary Jane. So now we have reminders for everyone. So please answer the evaluation form to claim your certificate. The link is posted in the chat box. Contact us at the same time. We will be posting it on our SMCC Learning Resource Center Facebook account. So we are about to end our webinar. We hope we deliver informative morning to everyone. Stay connected with your library, the SMCC or the St. Michael College of Caraga Learning Resource Center, and to your librarians through our Facebook page, email address, and contact number presented on the screen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming in, Miss Emmabeth Nanol. Miss Beth, anyone can hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I think kindly repeat your thank you message for Miss Emmabeth Nanol because she left the kanina. Miss Mary Jane Tobo, please.
Okay, ma'am. Good day, everyone. In behalf of my classmates, schoolmates, librarians, and instructors, I would like to say thank you to our dearest speaker, Miss Emmabeth Inghog Nanol. Thank you for giving us your time, Mom, and sharing your knowledge and expertise to us. We learned a lot from you, and it's a great opportunity that we meet you in this kind of event. Thank you so much, Mom. And our dearest instructor, Ms. Rinel R. Salem, we really appreciate your effort, Mom, for exposing us in this kind of activity. God bless us all. Thank you so much.
I think is it okay, Miss Emmabeth? Can we see the faces of our participants and I will take a photo screenshot?
Yeah.
Please. Anyone, please open now your screen. I hope I can get everything. No? Wait a minute. Oh, how can I get everything?
Oh no, you can't get
I
everything.
cannot get everything.
Maybe you have to like screenshot all the pages. I don't know.
So bad. Anyway, thank you, Miss Emmabeth, for your
Miss
generosity to
Ren,
share. Yes,
pwede po
me.
siya i-tile.
Yes, Sir Jolo.
Miss Ren is, Ma'am Ren, pwede siya i-tile
Where
sa
I
change layout,
where
tapos change layout po.
where ko po mag-click? Which button?
Ito po ma'am, malapit sa present now na
Okay, one
button.
moment. Present now, then
More options, more
okay.
options po.
More options. Change
Then change
layout.
layout, then
Then
tile.
change layout.
Then
Right.
sa pinakailalim na part po,
Tiled.
i-49.
Okay, wait. Okay, so
Equal.
where I'm not taking. Thank you, Sir Jolo. Okay, one moment. Kasya na ba lahat? Are we all in? Not yet. Okay na? I think some of you here is not in the school. How come the others didn't open the
They're very shy.
May I please open your Is it okay? Okay, can you open now your video? Kanina it's not because we're having our webinar with our guest speaker. Please, I think there's some Terlonzon. Okay, anyway, I'll just screenshot now. Smile and wave. Okay, that's it. Okay, so Miss Emmabeth, thank you so much for
Thank
today, and
you.
hope we will see you another day. Okay, I know
Yeah.
you're open.
I'm very open. I'm staying home. It's been 7 months.
Okay,
But do email me. I mean, if anyone has questions, send me an email. I mean, this is not the end all. So, yeah, send me an email.
yeah, I told you Miss Imabet is very generous to share his talent or expertise to us, especially to our in our field. Anyway, Miss Imabet, we will send you our digital certificate since I'm also working at home right now. I'm taking care of my
Okay.
two kiddos. And anyway, thank you and goodbye everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you for
Thank
being
you,
with us. Thank you,
Emma.
Miss Imabet. And good night. Sorry, good night, Miss
Thank you.
Imabet.
Have a good rest of the morning.
Okay, good night, good day,
Bye.
everyone, and stay safe. Bye.
Ay, kakainin mo siya.